Okay, so I'm back after a brief pause over Easter, and rather fittingly, I'm talking about returning to authors that you've read previously and enjoyed and finding new novels from them. First up, we have The Telltale Heart by Jill Dawson. Jill Dawson's great strength, I think, as a novelist is that she is fantastic at creating really engaging narrative voices. And they're always so different, you never quite know what she's going to write next. So her previous novel, Lucky Bunny, gave us sort of craze era East End London, organised crime, and a really engaging female narrator. The Telltale Heart is set in the present day and gives us Patrick, who is a 50-year-old academic, a professor at university. He's a bit of a Lothario. He's been through a wife or two. He's just been through a rather ruinous relationship with a student, which may end up ruining his career. But his biggest problem is that he has problems with his heart, and he undergoes a heart transplant, but importantly, what's called a beating heart transplant, so that the organ itself is kept alive throughout the whole process. Upon waking up from that, he finds himself sort of looking and feeling about the world slightly differently, maybe undergoing a change of heart. About his life. And the question is whether this is a result of just simply a man waking up from a near-death experience, or whether this is more directly related to the actual organ itself. And this is because that idea is raised by Maureen, who is his counsellor, who's fascinated by the idea that some people have felt that after taking on a donor organ, they find themselves picking up some of the characteristics of the donor themselves. Rather unprofessionally, she lets slip more about the family of the donor, and so Patrick is able to find out more about them. And so, in fact, we get not just his narration, but also the narration from the donor himself, a young lad, and also going even further back, his ancestors, and we get to look at the Little Port riots, which happened in the 19th century. And through that, as I said, we get sort of three narrators for the price of one, which really showcases Jill Dawson's strengths. But also it allows us to look at lots of different themes which are thrown up around the idea of the heart. The things that we feel through our heart, the way that we cling to things, or the way that the heart can be considered something that is an organ that is strong and keeps us alive and keeps us focused and steadfast. As I say, lots of interesting themes there, and written in a very engaging style as ever with Dawson. The great joy, as I say, with her writing is that you never know what's going to come up next, and so I'll always be interested to see what she writes next. This book, as I say, very easy to read, very engaging, and lots of very interesting ideas thrown up by it. Now we move on to Gerard Woodward and Vanishing, which is his latest novel. Gerard Woodward wrote a trilogy of books around the Jones family, set in and around North London, and I was living there at the time, and I found that trilogy of books absolutely fantastic, particularly I'll Go to Bed at Noon, which was nominated for the Booker. Since then, he's written a novel called Nourishment, which was set during the Second World War, and looked at themes around the idea thrown up by rationing, not just food nourishment, but also the nourishment of the soul. Now we have another book set around the Second World War, and as you can see from the camouflage cover, this is the story of Kenneth Brill, who is an artist who ends up becoming involved in the Second World War as a camouflage expert, somebody who designs ways of camouflaging troop movements and vehicle movements. And what we get here is almost his entire life. We get his childhood, we get his training at the Slade as an artist, and we get everything leading up to the court-martial, which begins the novel, where he's on trial for treason, effectively, because it's suspected that paintings that he has made of his family home contain coded messages about plans to turn it into an airfield. There is so much in this book. It's a beast. The biggest novel he's written, almost 500 pages, and perhaps too much. I do wonder whether just a slightly harder editorial hand might have shaped this into a slightly more satisfying novel. What he does brilliantly is he includes some fantastic set pieces. I mean, really, really funny. This book is very, very funny, and he's great at setting up these comic set pieces. The only problem is that because the narrative focus goes forwards and backwards so much, I did find myself losing track of where I was occasionally, and a little bit hard to keep track of things sometimes. It's a small criticism. It just means that I find it's a good novel rather than a truly great one, but very engaging again, very funny, and very English. There's something very English about it, which I really enjoy with his writing. Again, another writer that I will always be interested to see what he writes next. Another great way, of course, to get involved with a writer is if they're writing a series of books. And here we have The Echo from James Smythe. This is the second in a projected 4-novel series, which I guess you would call science fiction, although it's literary science fiction. I'll call it that because he also writes literary novels, and he's prolific. His next literary novel is coming out in a couple of months. He seems to be writing 2 books a year at the moment. I have no idea how he does that. But anyway, The Echo is the sequel to The Explorer, which was about a manned mission into space, trying to take humans as far as they'd ever gone before and then come back again, except that it all goes horribly wrong, as space missions tend to in fiction and in film. And what they encountered was something which is called the singularity, and that, in the first novel, threw up lots of ideas about identity, loneliness, and I don't want to give too much away, so I'm going to stop there. Here we have The Echo, which is a sequel. Another mission is sent out to encounter the singularity. This is several years down the line, hoping to not make any of the mistakes of the first mission. We have 2 twins, one in the mission in the spaceship and the other back home manning it. And what's interesting here is it throws up lots of lovely themes about twins, about the echo, about repetition. A very clever way of writing a sequel and really engaging with the idea of a sequel. Very easy to read. I won't say enjoyable because it's not particularly enjoyable, but again throws up lots of really interesting ideas. If there's a danger with the book, it is that of repetition, bizarrely. Again, I think just a slightly swifter editorial hand might have just helped trim some of the excess off, because there's a little danger of repetition about those ideas of repetition. But really, really enjoyed it, and very excited to read the 3rd part when it eventually comes, although I believe I may have to wait at least a year, possibly longer for it. But definitely an author to keep an eye on, not just with his science fiction, but with his other writing too. Boom, 3 books, all good. Enjoy them. Take care.